Thousand Autumns, is a Meng Xi Shi novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 51. No one in the Jade Cloud sect expected the battle to be so intense. Kunyi was, after all, an expert of his generation as well as the disciple of Yulago, a person who almost broke even with Qi Feng in his time. Such an opponent could not be brushed off easily. Shen Qiao had already lost once, which must have left a great psychological effect on him. Winning the second round would be even harder for him than winning the first, because not only must he defeat his opponent, he must also overcome himself. Even though the disciples of the Jade Cloud sect were worried, the presence of their sect leader at least gave them the feeling of security that their sect leader could still take on the fight even if Shen Qiao lost. Only Yu Kunqi knew very well that Zhao Qianying's martial arts were already damaged due to her forcibly breaking out of the closed-door meditation. If Shen Qiao lost this battle, what awaited the Jade Cloud sect would be the fate of submitting itself to the mercy of others. But could Shen Qiao win? He held back the restlessness inside him and refocused all of his attention onto the battle itself. Kunyi's martial arts followed a wide-ranged, masculine, and domineering style. As his blade came down, the formidable wind it brought stirred up an earthquake. The blade chi struck the ground, but those who were watching the fight felt like the earth was shaking together with it. Their ears buzzed with the sound of the blade cutting through the air. The sound was so shrill and hard to bear that those with weaker martial arts foundations were already covering their ears. But if one were to think that Kunyi's lightness skill was bad because of these, then they couldn't be more wrong. They carried the battle from flat ground all the way to the cliff edge, then continued as they hung themselves against the cliff wall. Crushed stones splattered in all directions, and streams of inner chi darted around freely, dazzling people's eyes. Compared to Kunyi's overbearing attacks, Shen Qiao's moves appeared to be a little too gentle. His sword, just like himself, was mellow and lasting like a flower caressing one's cheek or a spring breeze rubbing the willow branches. While its extreme purity and clearness very much resembled the nature of Daoism, it also lost the aggressive sharpness. However, after the two exchanged over 100 or so moves and Shen Qiao still showed no signs of being at a disadvantage, those who had been worrying about Shen Qiao finally realized that the situation was totally different from what they expected. If the power of Kunyi's blade resembled the unstoppable, rumbling thunders, then Shen Qiao's sword, though it started out like an unremarkable trickling stream about to be stifled by the blade chi, continued uninterruptedly and gradually evolved in terms of intensity and scale. In the end, it was so majestic and seemed to tolerate everything around it just like an ocean accepting all rivers and their surging waves. The more he fought, the more terrified Kunyi became. Back then on Half-Step Peak, he could only use 8 layers of blade chi, but now he could do 9. His blade art skill had definitely reached new heights, and he had confidence that even if Shen Qiao wasn't injured in the first place, he could still take him on. The opponent in front of him appeared to be shallow and delicate like a clear puddle one could easily see through. However, when he put his hand in, he found out that he could not reach the bottom no matter what. The puddle turned out to be a deep pool. Like its name Rainbow Shadow suggested, this set of lightness skills from Mount Xuandu, when used looked as if a feather-like rainbow was stretching freely across the clear sky. The grieving celestial sword left several traces of white sword chi on the steep cliff, as if someone was painting a freehand style art. However, if one were to look closely, the sword chi carved so deeply into the hard stone surface that if these marks appeared on a human body, then that person's bones were probably exposed with their blood running all over the floor. Looking from afar, the light and shadow of the weapons intersected and crisscrossed with each other, but the brutal blade Qi wasn't able to take any advantage. Yu Kunchi breathed out a sigh of relief. He turned to his side and asked Zhao Qiaying, "Junior sister, do you agree that Daoist priest Shen should be able to win this time?" But Zhao Qiaying replied with a head shake, "It's not that easy. Did you realize that Kunyi has already attained the 9th layer of Blade Qi? As an equivalent to the highest state of sword intent, this last layer is extremely overbearing indeed. Each strike can turn into a myriad of shadows, capable of destroying the invincible. But so far he has only used it once, that one attack which Daoist priest Shen almost failed to shield." Yu Kunchi couldn't help but let out a surprised gasp, his heart once again in his throat. Is he trying to exhaust Daoist priest Shen's inner Qi? That's true. Daoist priest Shen can't compete with Kunyi in terms of inner Qi right now. The longer they fight, the more disadvantageous it is for him. Yu Kunchi started to feel a little anxious. Then what should we do? Did Daoist priest Shen not realize it? Is he just going to let Kunyi have his way like this? Zhao Qiaying didn't say anything. She did not believe that Shen Qiao hadn't figured out Kunyi's intention, but neither could she tell what Shen Qiao's plan was. Shen Qiao was also testing. He was testing his own bottom line. If the strategy of the Vermilion Yang had the ability to rebuild one's foundation and strengthen one's muscles and bones, then, as a martial arts which had integrated the merits of the three schools, the inner Qi it generated should also have the characteristics of each of the three schools. Daoism claimed that the greatest virtue was like water, in which to strive for is the same as to not strive for. This coincided with his sword art style, and because of their common origin, he had no problem using it. Buddhism honored solemnity, which contained both the awe of its guardian deity's terrifying gaze as well as the kindness one would find on bodhisattvas. This was a rather abstruse depiction. The strategy of the Vermilion Yang blended this concept into its inner Qi. Its rigidity, together with the softness of Daoism, formed a harmonious balance of yin and yang. This made it possible for him to blend in a trace of indomitability into his flexible sword moves, and also allowed him to switch his style freely between that of a gurgling stream and of a turbulent ocean. Confucianism, however, was more of a mixture. When Tao Hongjing wrote the strategy of the Vermilion Yang, he took the benevolent and tolerant aspect of Confucianism and used it to integrate and adjust each school's merits. When a practitioner exhausted their inner Qi, their dantian could produce more. Like spring coming upon a withered tree, such a steady flow of unlimited inner Qi is capable of bringing one back to life. Before, Shen Qiao had the inner Qi from Mount Xuandu as his foundation, which actually slowed down his progress when he studied the strategy of the Vermilion Yang later. Now that he had to learn everything from the beginning again, he was finally able to feel its wonder. It was indeed the most miraculous book in the world. In fact, most people probably didn't know its real marvel when they fought for it. What was even more intriguing was that Tao Hongjing probably had foreseen that it would be hard to keep a book in a world of chaos when he wrote it, and its content might not stay intact after he passed away. Therefore, even though the book had 5 volumes, each volume was a standalone. People would not lose the context when reading each by itself. If they could learn all of them, they would naturally attain the perfect state. But even if they only studied 1 or 2 volumes, their martial power would not be crippled, it just might not have as obvious an effect. Therefore, Shen Qiao was also using the battle to test the result of his many days of practice through Kunyi. A person could never display the limit of their capabilities during friendly competitions. Only a life and death crisis could bring out their full potential and push them towards a new breakthrough. The way of martial arts was like rowing a boat upstream. To stop moving forward meant to fall back. Otherwise, people like Chifenga and Hulagu wouldn't have to stubbornly choose to go forward at the risk of losing their honorable status and many years' worth of martial power or even their lives. The situation was extremely dangerous for Shen Qiao. His sword chi was entirely suppressed by Kunyi's blade, and his inner chi was also running out. The speed of his attacks was significantly slower compared to that of before, even the power of sword chi was gradually weakening. It looked like he was going to lose in no time. Kunyi swung his blade at him, and a frightening wave of inner chi suddenly burst out of it. Blade chi turned into an inescapable net, surrounding Shen Qiao from all sides. It carried with it an imposing momentum, burning all plants, evaporating all rivers, and even killing all birds in its way, and in the end, it blew right at Shen Qiao's face. This was the 9th layer of blade chi that Kunyi took pride in. Surrounded by it, one could not imagine a second way to deal with such a bullying blade chi except to take it with brutal force. Kunyi had indeed proven himself as a disciple of Hulagu. There were few in the world who could even survive this one blade strike from him. Concentrating all of his inner chi on the blade, he swung it down right at Shen Qiao's head from midair in such a magnificent manner as if it was going to split even the stars. Shiwu opened his eyes wide. He was staring so fixedly at the two people across the deep chasm that he even forgot to breathe. He wanted Shen Qiao to win more than anyone else, but even a martial arts beginner like him could tell that the situation was unfavorable to Shen Qiao. Above him was the boundless clear sky, and below him was the bottomless crevice. From heaven to earth, the dozen-meter-high cliff he stood on was the only place he had. At this most critical moment, there was not even enough time for him to use lightness skill to flee. What should he do to hold back this all-out strike from his opponent? Zhao Qianying frowned. She couldn't help reach out to cover Shiwu's eyes. She didn't want him to see his master's blood splashing right before him. Shiwu had already lost one master. He would not be able to take the blow of losing another one dear to him. She regretted deeply inside. She should be the one fighting. If she had known this earlier, she would never agree to let Shen Qiao take her place. Seeing how confident Shen Qiao was, she thought he had a trump card against Kunyi, but she never anticipated that the other person would really fight with their life and place himself in such a dangerous state. The blade chi was quick like lightning. Within almost no time, it was already touching the end of his brows. But Shen Qiao's breath suddenly slowed down. He closed his eyes. He didn't choose to escape, instead, he raised his sword and moved towards it. Feel first the world then oneself, forget first oneself then the world. Only by doing so, a person can forget both the world and themselves and then become truly unaffected by all ups and downs in life. The grieving celestial sword turned into a band of white sword light, and within the light, Shen Qiao's figure was nowhere to be seen. The assertive smile on Kunyi's lips suddenly froze. His blade chi could not advance any further. Shen Qiao's sword pierced straight through his blade chi and was striking right at his chest. This was not right. Kunyi immediately turned around and swung the blade in his hand horizontally before him. Just as he expected, Shen Qiao appeared behind him, and the two strands of white sword intent turned back to suppress his blade chi. This was impossible. The thought flashed through Kunyi's head, but he didn't have time to think deeply about it. Concentrating power on his feet, he leaped high into the air and, as he turned around, struck down at the cliff behind him. The rocks on the side of the mountain crumbled almost immediately with a deafening sound. Stones of various sizes started falling one after the other. He then jumped upwards again and landed directly on the top of the cliff. He glanced down, but amidst the falling rocks, his opponent's trace was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, an alarm rang in his head. Kunyi turned around and made another strike. But this one didn't land on his enemy. Instead, he felt a sharp pain on his back. The other person was even faster than him and had obviously detected every move he intended. It was impossible. Impossible. He thought Shen Qiao had reached the state of sword intent, but this clearly wasn't sword intent. Wherever the sword was, it was also the place where the way was. Knowing each other inside out, connected through flesh and soul, Shen Qiao and his sword were like two hearts sharing a common beat. Sword heart. It was sword heart. Shen Qiao actually comprehended sword heart. After he discovered this terrifying fact, Kunyi dashed forwards like hell. The pricking pain followed behind him like a shadow. It never stopped, as if it was tied to him by an invisible thread, and he was the puppet on the other end, unable to escape its control no matter what. This felt absolutely terrible. Kunyi had never felt so horrified even when he was chased by Yan Wushi. Yan Wushi was only after him to test his martial arts. Kunyi knew it too, so he didn't use all of his strength at that time. But now it was different. Since he had the intention to kill Shen Qiao could also kill him. If both parties were giving it their all, then luck was out of the question. Given enough time, this person would definitely become a great enemy of his. But the future was too distant for Kunyi. What he needed to do first was to escape. He couldn't help crying out loud, "I admit my defeat. I lost. Don't kill me." He could still sense the prickling pain, but it seemed to have suddenly been mitigated by a lot. Kunyi dared not let down his guard as words rushed from his mouth, "I have something to tell you. It's about Yan Wushi. He has belittled and humiliated you so many times. Now that his time of death is close, don't you want to kill him with your own hand?" The sword light swept past his hair and nailed the tree trunk in front of him, instantly splitting the latter into two parts across the middle. Kunyi felt a sharp prickling pain in his outer ear and his cheek. It must have been caused by the sword light. But if he hadn't said those words just now, the tree trunk surely wouldn't be the only thing it had cut through. He ran out of strength and stopped. Using his blade as a stick, he leaned on the stone wall behind him and breathed heavily, not even caring to wipe away the blood stain next to his mouth. He could almost hear the pounding of his own heart. "I lost. You win." The last thing he could have expected was for Shen Qiao to reach the state of sword heart. At this moment, all he could think of was him escaping death and the lingering fear that came after it. He also knew that once he admitted his defeat, someone like Shen Qiao who adhered strictly to martial ethics would never run him to earth and hit him when he was already down. Qi Fengge and Hulagu would have done the same. Kunyi asked, "Have you ever heard of the Coiling Dragon Fair?" Shen Qiao didn't respond. Apparently he was waiting for the other to continue. Kunyi took a breath and said, "On September 9th, a grand gathering called the Coiling Dragon Fair will be held in the capital of Tuyuhun, Fuqi City. Merchants from all walks of life gather there every year, and there are almost always rare treasures being brought to the daylight and sold to whoever makes the highest offer. It is said that one of the auction items this year belonged to Yan Wushi's mother." Shen Qiao frowned slightly. As if he had sensed the other person's doubts, Kunyi sneered, "I heard from my senior martial brother that Yan Wushi's original family name was Xie. He was said to be a descendant of the Xie clan in the Chen Commandery. This clan started around Wei and Jin dynasties. During that time, they and the Wan clan were both top rich and powerful families in the world, and the most famous person among them all was Xian. However, things changed as time passed, and old glories no longer shone. The Xie clan had already declined greatly, but a lean camel was still bigger than a horse. The family was still well renowned in the southeast region. It was the kind of prestige that was completely unrelated to the pugilistic world but purely built among scholars and in the imperial court. But Shen Qiao was thinking one level deeper. This information must be extremely secret. You spend most of your life on the prairie beyond the Great Wall and are not involved in the affairs in the Central Plains. How did you know about it? Unless someone else told you. You're right. Yan Wushi has made many enemies, and all of them will be satisfied with nothing short of Yan Wushi's destruction. On September 9th, all talents will come together at Fuqi City. The 5 top martial experts in the world are closing in on Yan Wushi for the kill. Even if his martial arts are unrivaled, it is impossible for him to escape from this siege. As someone who was once twisted around his little finger, you must be looking forward to going there and witnessing his death yourself, aren't you? Shen Qiao suddenly said, I finally understand. Understand what? Shen Qiao said, out of all countries, the northern Zhou is most likely to unify the world. Yuanyang joined forces with Chen, and they attacked Qi with a crushing force. As Qi destruction is within sight, it leaves the next target of Zhou to be either Zhou or Chen. The cleansing moon sect is assisting Yuanyang, therefore, in order to kill Yuanyang, you must kill Yan Wushi first. So you cooperated with the Linghuan Institute to kill Yan Wushi. With the Linghuan Institute's huge influence in southern Chen, they were also able to help you find out the identity and origin of Yan Wushi. At this point, Kunyi wasn't going to cover it up anymore. You got most of it right, except for one thing. The one who helped us find Yan Wushi's background was not the Linghuan Institute. It was the Six Harmonies Association. I said earlier that Yan Wushi has made many enemies. Back then on that night in the Beyond Clouds Monastery, he straightly ruined Douyanshan's good deal and destroyed the strategy of the Vermilion Yang in front of everyone. How can Douyanshan not hate him? Then what about the Linghuan Institute? Ruyan Kehu is wholeheartedly focused on restoring the Han nation's legitimism. If such a plan can eliminate Yan Wushi and thus take away Yuanyang's right-hand man, it would be impossible for him to just sit by and watch. Many months ago, he fought against Yan Wushi in the Chen dynasty. It was to test Yan Wushi's skills as well as to prepare for the action on September 9th. That's right. But Ruyan Ky was also injured, so he cannot attend the gathering on September 9th. Who else is coming besides Douyanshan and Duan Vinyang? Your martial brother Uai, the sect master of the Mirror of Art sect Guang Lingsan, and the former great preceptor of Zhou Zen master Switting. Every name he uttered was more frightening than the one before. But if one thought carefully, it all made sense. Uai had been collaborating with the Tuzhou people. When Duan Vinyang invited him, it was only natural for him to be happy to lend a hand. The 3 demonic sects were enemies with each other in the first place. Once they killed Yan Wushi, the cleansing moon sect would be without a leader, and, with the harmony sect's internal conflicts, the Mirror of Art sect would finally stand out, which was reasonable enough for Guang Lingsan to stay in. As for Zen Master Switting, he was originally the Grand Preceptor of Zhou. After Yuanyang's succession to the throne, he started persecuting Buddhism and even dismissed Switting from his post. The status of Buddhism in Zhou suffered a devastating decline ever since. Whether it was for the sake of orthodoxy or killing the devil, Zen Master Switting would also join them in the fight. It was true that killing one with 5 didn't sound very honorable for a martial arts grandmaster, but who would refuse if they could gain the utmost benefit out of it? After a moment of silence, Shen Qiao asked, how do you know that Yan Wushi will go? He might have gotten wind of it already. Kunyi said, my senior martial brother once said that people like Yan Wushi will go even if he knows it is a trap, because he believes too much in his own ability and is too proud. In his mind, even if he loses, he can still manage to leave without trouble. Things that are too rigid tend to break easily. Isn't this one of the favorite sayings of you Central Plains people? Shen Qiao now completely understood. He sighed. Ruyan Ky fought against Yan Wushi on purpose. His intention was to lure out the flaw in Yan Wushi's martial arts. Since Guan Lingsan is from the demonic sect, he must know how to kill Yan Wushi. So this time you all have come prepared and are determined to succeed. That's right. I know you also hate Yan Wushi to the core. It will be such a grand gathering. Even if you don't participate yourself, how can you not come and have a look at least? However, as he was saying it with a smile, he suddenly raised the blade in his hand and swung it at Shen Qiao. He knew Shen Qiao would be shaken by the news. A person's defense was at its lowest when their mind wavered, therefore, he was certain that this stroke would succeed. This person would surely become a huge pain to both him and to Zhu. He could not let him live. Kunyi had already made up his mind as early as when he admitted his defeat. He poured all of his martial power into this move. He would win, or he would perish. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.